Welcome to Voice of San Diego at Home. It's May 18th, 2020. It's Monday. We have gotten through yet another weekend. I think it's 9 weeks into this madness? 9 weeks. On Netflix this weekend, my wife and I watched the Jerry Seinfeld special. I don't know if you've seen Jerry Seinfeld has a new comedy special. It was quite something. It was good. Very funny. I think the only part neither of us really liked was the extended riff in the middle about his marriage and his wife. His marriage seems a little troubled, but it was a great show. Great. It was fun to laugh, but I gotta say, it was really weird to watch somebody talk about life, about people getting together, about the world pre-COVID-19. I mean, he has so many bits about his discomfort with like touching people, being around people, going to dinner. He has this whole bit about going to dinner and how not great it is. We're watching that going like, what a weird, what a weird reality we've entered into. He has no idea when he's recording that he's not going to be able to go out to eat within a whatever time period. Just that whole discussion was just so odd. I recommend it. It's funny, but it is so strange to think back. There was this big this thing going on Twitter and other places. Try to find your last photo from before the quarantine. And I did that, and it was just like, it's just such a weird experience. Ours was, we put up with my dad and some friends, put up a basketball hoop. That was my last photo from before the virus, probably the last time I shook somebody's hand. Weird times. I recommend the Jerry Seinfeld thing, but it was a strange deal. All right, welcome. We've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to go through, we've got some big news from the school district, San Diego Unified School District, and other major school districts. We also have some big news from the governor, and we're going to talk about some of the things we have been reporting on the website as well. Let's get right into it. First off is this issue. Let's talk about this for a second. So County Supervisor Jim Desmond has been going around talking about his insight. And his insight is this. He says, hey, look, there's been like 200 people who've died from COVID-19, but only six of them have died really. He said this was on Fox. He said it other places too. Each of the families who've lost a loved one, my heart goes out to them. But out of those 200 deaths, only 6 had no underlying conditions. Only 6 had no underlying conditions. What's going on there with this, Supervisor Desmond? What are you getting at here? I feel like what he's getting at is those weren't real deaths. Those weren't real COVID-19 deaths. They are added improperly to this discussion of deaths. First of all, let's set aside that deaths is the only thing that matters. The assumption in this discussion that death's the only thing that matters. To me, I'm personally more worried about spending a month in the ICU than I am dying or something like that happening to somebody I care about or work with. I know people who have had to do that. I literally know them. It's not a removed concern. I know people who've had to go to the hospital. Let's set that aside for a second. Let's set that aside. What he's saying is, to each of the families who've lost a loved one, my heart goes out to them. But out of those 200, only 6 had no underlying conditions. Let's talk about underlying conditions for a while. High blood pressure, uncontrolled asthma. I have asthma. I control it. I think it's mostly my allergies, not that bad. I know people with blood pressure problems. How many of you know people who take blood pressure medication or otherwise have high blood pressure? Are they ready to die? Are we okay with their deaths? Because this sure shows some callousness to their death. My parents, other people, I don't want them to die. They're not ready to die. They're perfectly functioning parts of my life. I have board members, colleagues, all of whom are over 65, many of whom they're not ready to die. They're still very functioning, important members of my community. Mr. Desmond himself is 64, 63. Does he have any underlying conditions? If he caught coronavirus and died and he had high blood pressure, would we say he's ready to go? It's his time. Don't worry about him. This is crazy. I cannot believe he's going down this path. It shows a absurd callousness toward people who are over 65 or have any of these rather common problems: diabetes, blood pressure, high blood pressure. Union Tribune editorial page editor Matt Hall has made a big deal over the last year about how he had high blood pressure, real high blood pressure. He's my age. He's a little older than me. He's not ready to die. The callousness is incredible. So why? What's going on here? What is actually happening with that discussion? And I think what's happening with that is that there is a broadening recognition that what we're dealing with here is not just the government restrictions on what we can do and open and such, but also the trauma that we've experienced. And when you think back on this whole 9 weeks of experience, what we're talking about is we lived one way, and now because of a virus that sends a lot of people to the ICU, a lot of people to the hospital, a lot of people to their deaths, forced a lot of changes. They didn't want 300,000 people, 100,000 people to have to go to the hospital. They shut everything down. But that entire thing, we also shut things down. We also stayed in. I asked on Twitter this weekend, I did a poll. I asked how many people would go to a restaurant that had the full trappings of masks, separated space. You go in and out at a certain way. Everything was in place that is supposed to be in place. They say, let's say the governor says you can open a restaurant and all of these protections are in place. Would you go? I'm asking you right now. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Periscope, all y'all. If all of those things were in place, if you had your favorite restaurant and it had, everybody had masks on. Sorry, it was garbage day. I hope you can't hear that. If you can, sorry. This is Voice of San Diego at home. This life. What is happening with this life? If you had a restaurant, if you had your favorite restaurant and the server had a mask and it was sparsely occupied because of social distancing requirements, and they were taking all the napkins and the placemats and putting them in the trash, in a special biological hazard trash, would you go? I didn't necessarily want to get the results from Twitter. I don't think they're scientific. I'm not going to say this is what happened. I wanted to provoke thought. I'm actually curious. I would probably go. My wife was like, no way. There is a trauma that has set in this community. And it's not about just the government saying, okay, you can go back to a restaurant with these restrictions. The trauma has set in about whether we would want to go to those restaurants. We almost need something now to address that trauma, to make us feel better about going about life. And the government can say all at once about how it is now okay to go to these places. But that's just the first part. The second part is convincing people to do all those things. Look at it. We have California that's a closed state, supposedly. And we have Texas, which is an open state. Joe Rogan, the famous podcaster, told people that he thinks about leaving California because he's sick of the lockdown, wants to go to Texas. So I decided to spend some time on Texas's own guidelines for reopening, because we have this weird situation where Texas is open with a lot of restrictions and California is closed with a lot of exceptions. It's like, and so how far apart are they really? Well, today, the Texas gyms were allowed to open. Gymnasiums, working out in Texas is allowed to happen starting today. But 25% occupancy is required. You can't have 3/4 of your gym cannot be filled the way it was before. No showers and no locker rooms. The shower part gets me. What? It seems like hygiene is something we shouldn't emphasize these days. I'm not quite sure why showers aren't allowed in Texas right now at gyms. But we have this situation where we're talking about all of these things being open or closed according to what the government allows. So today, Governor Gavin Newsom in California announced that a lot of things could start reopening pretty soon. Churches, restaurants, all these things are going to start. He said June 1st, we should be able to play professional sports without fans. Same thing as Texas, as far as they were concerned, May 31st. So, okay, things are moving along. But none of this addresses the trauma. And so when we get back to what he's talking about, I think what he's trying to do there is address the trauma. I think what he's trying to say there is that you shouldn't have been traumatized by this, because only 6 people have died. Only really 6 people have died. There was this protest this weekend at the county of San Diego. This is at the county administration building. Probably the most logical place to have a protest. Finally, they finally found the place to actually go. And there was one of these signs that caught me that seems right up to address this very point. 0 deaths in San Diego under 20. 0 deaths in San Diego under 20. Again, I think what you're seeing there is somebody trying to address this issue of trauma. It doesn't matter unless kids were dying. It doesn't matter if you die because you have high blood pressure. It doesn't matter if you're dying or if you're going to an ICU. It doesn't matter. None of this actually matters. The only thing would matter is if kids were dying all over the place. Then we could be traumatized the way that you are traumatized, right? Get rid of the trauma. I think that's a mistaken approach. I think if we were dealing with a person who was traumatized, we wouldn't say, the thing you had was stupid, get over it, wasn't even real. That's not going to get people to go back to gyms and restaurants and go back to cafes and such. You're going to have to address this. Not only do these folks want the government to release these restrictions, they also need, and I think recognize now, that the government needs to endorse. It needs to go further and actually endorse. And that's the real difference we're talking about between these blue states and these red states, is this act of endorsement. Are you going to symbolically clear the way for people to go back to these places? And the lack of willingness to do that is what seems like is frustrating a lot of people. And so it's a very interesting moment. And I think it should be a different way. I think we should address this more wholly. What can we do? I don't think if you put a bunch of masks in a restaurant, a bunch of plastic up, I don't think that's going to make people feel like it's time to be going back to these restaurants. I don't think that communicates that. I think, in fact, if you put up a restaurant and it's full of people with masks and it's got tape where you're not supposed to walk and it's just got sanitation bags all over the place, I don't think that really sends the message that we're back. I think it says like, this is a pretty dangerous thing. Maybe we'll hang out for a while. You can do it if you want. In order to get through this and truly reopen and truly become the same people that we were, to get together, to spend time together, to be with each other, to have all these experiences, we're going to have to address that trauma. We're going to have to work together to come up with solutions that people are excited about. We're going to have to rebrand in a way, which is why I get so stuck on this outside thing. We had Howard Blackson on the podcast this week. I highly recommend it. Go to Voice of San Diego podcast on your Apple podcast app, on Stitcher, Voice of San Diego. We had a great interview with Howard Blackson. He's an urban designer. His point was like, we got to get outside with some of these restaurants. They're not going to be able to have the same number of tables as they once did. Bring them outside. Close some streets. Close Little Italy's India Street. Close 30th in South Park. These places, I would say Newport and Ocean Beach. Close the street and let the restaurants come out and spread out. Because the other thing we're learning about is that it's a lot better to be outside. Not only does the UV light help, but the ventilation is really important. I spoke this week with Rebecca Miller-Fieldson, an epidemiologist at UC San Diego. She said, take all the daycares and summer camps outside. I think we need to rebrand this whole effort. If you make people feel better and rebrand this entire experience of life and dining out and all these things as a new way of living for a while. Because, going back to the old way of life with a quarter of the people at the gym, no showers, no locker room, bunch of tape, bunch of masks, that's not the way to do it. But don't deny people their trauma. Don't say you're afraid of something that isn't real. Only 6 people actually got this thing in a bad way. That's crazy. So many people got sick and in ICUs. That's bad too. Why is death the only thing we're talking about? All right, enough on that. Only 6 people died from, real. That's just such a weird thing to do. I don't need any of the people I love or work with who have high blood pressure to die right now. I don't need it. I want them to be alive. Don't write off their experience. The number of people who have diabetes, blood pressure, or are over 65 is very high. Let's not forget their experience. All right, big news today. San Diego Unified School District Superintendent Cindy Martin did one of these for her community today. Few more viewers than I do. Actually, it looks pretty good today. Few more viewers than I have. And she announced that they had today sent out a letter along with several other school districts across the state telling the governor and state lawmakers that, hey, this budget you're talking about isn't going to work. Is not going to work. She said in her thing, I wrote this down, it was amazing. We have sent a clear letter in this joint statement to state lawmakers, and we said we cannot in good conscience risk the health and safety of our students and staff by returning to the classroom prematurely and without funding for the necessary precautions, given the continued lack of national testing program and a lack of clear understanding of the impacts of coronavirus on young people. We cannot in good conscience risk the safety of our students and staff. Wow. That seemed like a really interesting moment in local politics and public affairs. Let me pull up the actual letter. This was extraordinary too. The list of things that they said they want. They said they want a tax on utilities. They want to allow, they want to protect districts from liability if somebody gets coronavirus. They want to get the same amount of money that they got per student as they have over the last few years, no matter what happens. Because one of the things we were talking about, if you were with me last week, Laura Cohn and I talked about if they do distance learning in the fall, if they do an online platform like this in the fall, there's probably going to be a lot of parents who decide that their kids are going to be better off working with some of these homeschool or charter schools that have been doing this online learning for quite some time. They know the technology, they're into it, they've built it, they've learned some things about it. And if that's what school is, maybe we should go with the people who have been doing it for a long time. So this is directly responding to that. They're saying authorize school districts to earn average daily attendance using a 3-year rolling average of ADA. Schools get paid per student. It's called average daily attendance. That's why they care so much about if your kids go to class or not, because they want they want the kids to get education, but they also want to get paid for that student to have gone there. Every time a student takes his average daily attendance money to a charter school or something, that costs the traditional school money. Now, of course, the charter school is providing a service underneath that same school district, but that's part of what they're talking about there. They're saying they want the state to still give them the same amount of money no matter how many students do that or how many students just stay out of class. They also say they want to suspend the statutory requirements related to class size reductions. They want to authorize school districts to deposit fund balances and revenues from developer fees into the general fund. Do you know what we're talking about here? This is the thing that says that if when they build a housing development, the developer has to pay fees for building schools nearby, right? Well, they're saying they want those fees not to go to building schools. They want those fees to go to the general fund of a school district so they can pay for some of these things they want to deal with. There's more. Authorize school districts to reduce the instructional year and minutes without penalty. They want to make the school year shorter if they have to. This one, authorize certificated employees to retire mid-year, be rehired as substitute teachers for the remainder of the school year, and then suspend the 180 days requirement that prevents retirees from returning to the classroom. This is a big letter. This is a really big letter. A truly extraordinary moment in local schools. They're saying they need more money. We don't know what they're going to do to make it safe for people to go back to school, but they're saying they need more money to do it, and they need more flexibility from the state. Obviously, I am extremely concerned about schools and have been. We cannot reopen. You can have your gyms, you can have your spas, you can have your restaurants. Where's special ed? Where's childcare? I'm hearing from parents that there are childcare facilities opening up. They don't know exactly how many people want to come back. They're asking surveys, sending out things. We got a survey from the YMCA. How many people got the survey from the YMCA? If you're a parent out there, comment here. Are you comfortable sending your kid to summer camp right now with the YMCA? I'd be interested in your thoughts. Are you comfortable sending your child to the YMCA summer camp this summer? We're trying to decide right now. I don't know. I'm love to have them have something to do, but we're not sure. What's the situation? What's the plan? Really important moment for local schools. We're doing some reporting on that. Will Huntsberry's on that today. Been talking to some trustees who have different messages right now. Stay tuned for that. Go to voiceofsandiego.org this afternoon or tomorrow, and you will see an update on all of these plans and non-plans for opening schools. But again, get back to that. Is she saying there, we cannot in good conscience risk the health and safety of our students and staff by returning to the classroom without the funding necessary for precautions? Is she saying we're not opening schools? So I asked her that, typed in my little Facebook machine, Are you saying you won't open schools until if this budget cut happens as promised? Remember, the government, the state is dealing with a huge budget crisis. They've announced significant cuts to school. And I was asking, are you saying you can't open schools if that's what happens? And she said, no, schools are open. So they never closed. They're open. This is what we're getting to. Like, are schools actually closed with this distance learning program? And then this was almost 90%, or I'd say 75% at least of the comments she got on that stream were, are you opening schools? How are you deciding whether to open schools? When is that going to be open? And she obviously she doesn't know yet. So she's saying we're planning for all these scenarios, blended learning. Yeah, we could go half days and then other people half days. There could be so many different iterations of how this school looks. It's going to be extraordinary to watch them make this decision. God, this trash truck is just doing a lot of trash pickup right here at this very moment of this stream. All right. Yes, Governor Newsom announced today that sports teams could begin playing without fans May or June 1st. June 1st. Here's a question. I don't think I would send my kids to a Y camp right now. The emotional benefits would be tremendous, but it just feels too soon. This is what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just the government deciding it's okay that we need to deal with. You have got to address this. I'm not sure I would send my kids to a Y camp right now. It just feels too soon. What are we going to do to get over that trauma? And just saying, don't be traumatized, only 6 people died, is not the way. That's not how you get people over this trauma. That's not how you make it comfortable again to go to the Y. And all those things would need to be bargained with the employees. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say, like, you hear the president 100 times, the president's like, kids aren't susceptible. I think there's really good evidence that kids aren't that vulnerable to this disease. And I think there's really good evidence that maybe they won't carry it to other people. But there's a lot of people who work with kids who are susceptible. So they got to work this all out. I do think there is an extraordinary challenge for public education going forward right now. If they define adequate school as some of the distance learning that we've been seeing, then I think that there will be an exodus to other opportunities with online charter schools or homeschool opportunities, unless they somehow restrict those. And if they do that, what are they going to do to lure people back? And what is that going to do to their already struggling finances? Here's another one. I wouldn't send my kids to a camp or summer school now. Kids will never wear masks or keep their distance, and kids can get the virus too. I mean, yeah, that's what you've got to get over. I don't think that kids are going to wear masks. I don't think there's not a part of my kids' school that I can picture them socially distanced in. I understand that if they change their approach and they spread out outside in the courtyards and the cafeterias, spread out as much as possible, I can see that maybe coming together. But I don't think we can rely on social distance. There needs to be intense testing, as there are in some of these European countries where they test the teachers, say, once a week, sit out for 2 weeks, give them proper sick leave so they can do that. Make sure people can be tested very often and then squelch out the outbreaks as they occur. That's the only option. I don't think there's any, I think there's some distance work you can do. I think you can spread people out, but what are you going to, you're going to like cut school. You're not going to cut class sizes in half or a third. That's not going to happen. We've got to figure out how to redesign all of these things, from dining to summer camps to schools to all these things, to make it a a new lifestyle. I was talking to Nathan Fletcher, this county supervisor. I've been doing some interviews about where we're heading. And he said, well, I said, have we somehow transitioned to like where we're trying to literally stamp out this virus before anything can happen? And he said, no. We're trying to switch to a new lifestyle, a new modified existence where 80%, 70%, 80%, 90% of what we were doing is on, but we're wearing masks, we're socially distanced and stuff like that. And he said, and then we'll sit in that for a long time until the virus is gone. What we can't handle is another spike. We can't go through all of this for the last 9 weeks and then see a giant spike and shut everything down again. We just cannot allow that to happen. And so, with that is this existence that we have to live with of like this modified landscape. And so what does that look like? We need the like smartest, most interesting people to decide that. I was talking to that epidemiologist from UC San Diego, Rebecca Miller Fielding, and she said, put all the summer camps outside, spread out. She said, look, it doesn't look like kids are getting this. It doesn't look like they're spreading this, but the people who work with them are somebody we should care about, and we can't rest the burden on them to deal with all this risk. She said, but look, if you wanted to have people over at your house right now, have them over at your house. Stay apart, bring your own food. She said, I had to deal with the risk. This is an epidemiologist, works with HIV in Africa. Know your status, she said, was the biggest thing. Know your status. Where have you been? Have you been tested? She said, look, I have a 2-year-old. I'm trying to deal with this whole thing. I decided to bring my babysitter in. And now we have our nanny in the house working with us because I can understand confidently where she's been. I can deal with where we've been. And that's a risk that I'm willing to take to live my life. We cannot eliminate all risk. But we also can't just roll it out with like all these masks and tapes and stuff. We've got to figure out an entirely new way to live with this threat. And that's why I'm so intensely focused on spreading out within schools and within these open spaces, because we boil off every restriction we can, from you can open restaurants to all these things, but it's all going to boil down to one core restriction, which is don't get together inside. Don't get together inside. Don't go to a funeral inside. Don't go to a church inside. Don't gather in a packed house inside. That's why I've said move it outside. But when you boil everything off to don't get together inside, well, the one big problem with that is that's what a school is. It's a bunch of people together inside. So if we understand as a community that that's the core thing we have to avoid, can't get together inside, what can we do otherwise? And that's why I'm so interested in that idea of like, let's put all the restaurants outside, put all the churches outside. They should convert all the drive-through theaters, all the drive-in theaters, have a concert at a drive-in theater, have a church service at a drive-in theater, convert the entire parking lot at the San Diego Sports Arena, convert that to a concert venue or a church or whatever. Have people go to it outside, ventilation. Don't go inside a packed house. There was a great CDC investigation into a super spreading event that happened in Canada at a curling event inside. Don't go to a curling event inside. I don't know, everybody into curling here? Spread out. Get outside, figure out a new way to brand this. Okay, a couple other news notes. Remember that idea? We have more than 1,000 people right now living in the San Diego Convention Center. The San Diego Convention Center Corporation is running on fumes right now, but the convention center itself is now the home of about 1,000 San Diego residents experiencing homelessness. What's going to happen to them when they get out? We've been wondering about that question and following it, and one of the answers just fell apart. The San Diego Housing Commission Friday decided in closed session not to move forward with any of the 10 properties they were considering negotiating and purchasing. Those were hotel properties, distressed hotels that they were thinking of buying. They wanted to buy. They were negotiating, and they decided not to buy them. And this was that idea that Mayor Kevin Faulconer, several other people had to purchase these distressed hotels and to turn them into places that people could live. Homeless people could be transitioned to permanent housing. We don't know why they decided not to buy it. It looks like they did some inspection of those buildings and decided, maybe not. The commission could still move forward to identify new properties and negotiate a lease-to-own deal with the owner to begin renovating them and moving in formerly homeless residents. They still budgeted the money, so this still could happen, but those 10 properties are not going to be purchased by the San Diego Housing Commission or the City of San Diego. Next news item. Tomorrow is May 19th. The City Council will be meeting, and it will not be discussing the deal that San Diego State University put together, the purchase and sale agreement to transfer Mission Valley land around the stadium to San Diego State University. Why? We don't know. We don't know why it's not on the docket. The mayor believes that it had to be on the docket to get done by July so that they can, A, get the money from the sale for the next budget cycle, and B, not have to pay $1 million per month to maintain the old SDCCU stadium. But the real news, I think, was San Diego State held a press conference. I believe it was Wednesday last week. Trustee Jack McGrory, who's a trustee on the California State University system, he said for the first time, I think, that if they didn't get this deal done, that the pandemic and the economic catastrophe that it's caused could actually kill the deal. He said it's going to take, that there's so much a budget deficit, he says it's going to take a lot of time to work our way through balancing our budgets on both sides. This is the time to make this deal now before we get mired in the economic mess of cutting budgets and looking at all the projects that could potentially be cut, he said. He also said negotiations were over. It's time to get this deal done. I asked Georgette Gomez on Friday. She's the city council president. She's the one in charge of putting this and other things on the city council docket. I asked him whether it was still going forward. She says, yeah, absolutely. She's working really hard on it, cares about it deeply, thinks it has to get done. It's not on the docket. She'll have more details soon. I don't know what's going on with that. That's a fascinating thing. If this weren't a pandemic, an economic catastrophe, this would be the biggest story of the summer that we're heading into as far as San Diego public affairs, because this is a massive deal, and it's in trouble. Here's a question. Hey, my boy Craig, knowing you have been tooting this get outside horn, what have you been hearing in terms of willingness by cities to close streets and create more open spaces for commercial and pedestrian activities? Berkeley is already moving forward on this dine out deal, closing tons of streets. Seattle is closing dozens of streets, some of them permanently. There's a great story out of Berkeley, I will post if I can find it, about restaurants taking over the streets there. We just heard today that the Alcohol and Beverage Control Commission of the state has released new guidelines that are going to allow people to spread out and use some of their alcohol privileges within the street a little bit more. So if you did have a situation where a street was closed and the restaurant on that street could expand into the street, they could serve alcohol at those tables. It's happening, folks. They got to rebrand. It's not going to work to walk in to one of these restaurants and see it all decked out, laden with protective equipment. That's fine. I think it just has to be a completely new experience. Dining out is over for a while. Jerry Seinfeld doesn't have to worry about dining out anymore. Jerry Seinfeld doesn't have to worry about going out to dinner with his friends anymore. It's over for a while. I'll post that article. I will. Let me see if I can find it. My mom says that the dump truck wasn't that bad, so thank you. Um, uh, that's not going to work. I'll have to find it. I'll post that here. I'll post it on my Twitter feed, VOSD Scott. That's VOSD Scott. All right, here's another question. Is the county supervisor more knowledgeable than the medical examiner? Here's what she's talking about. To each of those families who lost a loved one, my heart's, but out of those 200 deaths, only 6 had no underlying conditions. Is the county supervisor? No, no, he's not. And to think he's been on board mostly with this situation for quite some time. So something's happening to him in the last week or so. He's decided to really go full bore into this suggestion that these deaths aren't real, that they're not real COVID-19 deaths. Yeah, my heart goes out to them, but out of those 200, only 6 had no underlying conditions. Well, who has no underlying conditions? I mean, what percent of the population has no underlying conditions? It's just it's an extreme callousness to people over 65, to people with high blood pressure, many of whom serve vital purposes in our families and in our workplaces and in our schools, our churches. I mean, stop saying that, sir. Stop saying that. I don't stop saying that. So the supervisor, public health officer, no. Yeah, he can. Yeah, look, he can say whatever, but I don't know what. Again, he's trying to minimize the trauma, and you don't get rid of trauma by saying, "Calm down, stop feeling what you're feeling." If you want people to go to a gym or go to a restaurant, rebrand it, make it clear that it's safe. If you can't make it clear that it's safe, then wait. And figure out how to make it safe, how to make it clear that it's safe. And making it clear that it's safe is not by saying that these deaths aren't real. All right. There was something else I wanted to do. No. Any other questions before I go? Wednesday we'll be back, 1:30 p.m. Oh, here we go. Convention Center. Are the funds for that coming from the state? Are those funds actually coming? There was a grant from the state to help with the initial funding of the Convention Center shelter. That's not guaranteed at all to keep going. Big question is there was $248 million from the federal government for relief funds for the city, and the city is currently debating how that money can be used. I think it's obvious it can be used for some of this convention center shelter issue, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on it to be used for regular city deficits. City has a big financial problem to deal with. What's the update on the city doc? I just talked about that, Ann. Quickly. I thought it had to happen this week. Maybe it doesn't. It seems like when you do the timing of how long it takes to get escrow done and close the San Diego State, no, that's all right. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's cool. That'd be funny, but it's mean. Get out of here. No, so I thought when you looked at, and so did the mayor's office, when you looked at the timeline, they had to get the deal done and discussed by the city council May 19th. That's what everybody said. Maybe that was just a fake date and they can do it next week and it'll be fine. Maybe that's the early date and then next week is the real date. I do not know what is going to happen with that. Basically, the city attorney has legal concerns, some of which are not insignificant, about the deal. SDSU's response is, don't worry about those things. When you buy a house, you get a stack of papers saying, here's the things you should worry about. Maybe consider not buying this house, but you still buy the house often. That's what's happening here. There's a big stack of concerns. Does the city council need to take that or not? I'm not drunk, no. Expectations of the county's plan to speed up reopening. I think you're going to see restaurants, churches, gyms all in the next couple of weeks. I mean, look, Texas just opened their gyms today, and it's an open state, and California is going to open it in like 2 weeks, and it's closed state. I mean, this is all just a big fight over words that nobody quite understands. Texas has tremendous restrictions and rules in place on everything from churches to restaurants to other places, and yet it's supposedly open. Okay. We are going to be back on Wednesday with Voice San Diego at home. Obviously, if you want to listen to our podcast, it's a great show this week. We had Howard Blackson and discuss that outdoor dining concept. Check that out. Go to Voice of San Diego on your podcast app, Apple Podcasts, or on Stitcher. And if you do support this show, go to voiceofsandiego.org and you see a big donate button. If you support any of our work, our investigative journalism journalists are doing, we have them out there every day asking some tough questions for the school district, the city council, the mayor, the county, all these places. There's nobody they love hearing from more than us as we grill them and make them explain what they're doing and find out things that they don't want to talk about. And so that team is dependent on your donations at vosd.org/give, voiceofsandiego.org/donate. All those things work. Provide donations. Thank you so much for your support. And our journalists are out there working their tail off, and we've really found our calling here as far as being a service. And so I really wanted to make sure I was available. Plus, I love talking every day, and my kids are getting sick of learning about San Diego public affairs, so you have to deal with it. Thank you all, and let me know if you have any other questions, and I'll make sure to post some of those things at my Twitter feed at VOSD Scott, or here in the comments as well, VOSD Scott on Twitter. And thanks, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.